Okay, welcome everyone. It's 3 o'clock. So my name is Ignacio Fernandez. I'm the Senior Policy Advisor for Climate Registry. And as such, I wanted to welcome you to this event today with such great speakers. But before that, I want to tell you about the Climate Registry. We're an organization that was created by the government of the state of California, and our work is to provide guidance and guidance to companies and organizations throughout the United States and Canada on how to better register their emissions, how to do the metrics, third-party verification, so any claims that they have on emissions have been verified by our organization. In addition, we also collaborate with leaders of different states and provinces in Canada to attend COP, Climate Week New York, and other events in order to beef up climate action throughout North America. Having said that, I'm going to welcome Maria Teresa Ruiz-Tagle from CLG Chile, and she's going to be a moderator today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ignacio, and thank you everybody for being with us today. I'm Maria Teresa Ruiz-Tagle, the Executive Director of the Corporate Leaders Group for Climate Action Chile, and I will be here talking about with the speakers about climate action in the Americas. We need collaboration in the America in order to really move the focus and move on in terms of climate action. And that collaboration can be done in many forms, but we strongly believe in terms of alliances, in terms of regional collaboration. So what we are going to do today is which are those opportunities that we can explore and which are the barriers, okay, that we have, the challenges that we have in terms of development those collaborations, because we all understand that we need to move in terms of decarbonizing the economies. We need to move on in terms of resilience. In fact, you are becoming very resilient. So thank you very much for being here in such a hot day today. But we need to work together. So through examples from Canada, from the Caribbean, okay, from Chile, from different parts of the world, from the US, of course, we are going to be talking about which kind of alliances, which could be public-private, private-private, private with the civil society, can we rely on, how can we work together in order to face these important challenges in the Americas? So that's our challenge today. We know that America is having some changes at the moment, therefore the other country needs to have a responsibility and an action, and today we are going to explore those possibilities. So I would like to invite our speakers for today. Give me a sec. Okay, so I would like to introduce John Lemire, who is the Envoy for Climate Change and Northern and Arctic Affairs from Quebec. Una May Gordon, the Board Co-Chair, Caribbean Climate Smart Accelerator. Thank you. Karen Ross, Secretary, California Department of Food and Agriculture. And Sam Troll, Commissioner from the Port of Seattle. Thank you very much, please.
Oh my gosh, I'm sorry.
Okay. Can you all hear well?
Oh, really?
Karen, are you okay without the headphones? Yeah, but you press in the middle, number 7, you should be listening. That's okay? Yep.
Where is
Is number 7 just in case? Yep. Okay, a bit. Okay, so thank you very much, everybody. Now it's better, Karen? Yes, much better, isn't it? Perfect. Okay, so we will start with an open question for all of you. Okay, so I will give you 2-3 minutes for you to give your position. So the questions are the following. How do you assess the current state of climate collaboration in the Americas? And where do you think are the most promising partnership opportunities? And what obstacles we must overcome first to take advantage of them in the Americas? So that's our focus. I don't know who would like to start. Uma? Okay, go ahead.
She looked at me, right?
On my right.
So thank you all very much for the opportunity. I'm Una Mae Gordon from Jamaica, as you heard. And I could answer that question in one word. Really one word, but I'll say the one word at the end because just for context, we know that the Americas consist of 34 countries. We are 34 strong, or probably 34 weak, if we take it as it is. Different economies, different populations, different types of languages, and different political economy as well, different priorities. But all in all, most of the countries in the Americas are joined by water. So a lot of us are joined by water. But still, we remain extremely fragmented. And there is really not a lot of collaboration and cooperation because they come together in the Americas. And if we look at the climate agenda, even here in Belém, a number of us belong to different negotiating groups with different priorities as well and different climate priorities. But as I like to tell my students, climate change is becoming, and the impacts of climate change is almost becoming a common property resource where we don't know when or where the next impact will be. So it's time. It's too fragmented, and therefore it's time.
Thank you very much, Uma. And I couldn't agree more. Coming from Chile, we have more than 3,000, 4,000 kilometers of coast, so definitely joined by water. So that's something that we need to push collaboration, and include the oceans as well in our conversation. Sam, would you like to take?
Sure, yeah. And I think in your opening remarks, you had referred to changes in the United States. I like to think of ourselves as going through an identity crisis when it comes to where we stand on climate change. I think the current climate, for lack of, no pun intended, in the United States politically has resulted in a deep polarization on the topic of sustainability and climate change, where you see states that have historically been very aggressive on tackling climate change double down, while you see states that are probably more conservative and or impartial to fighting climate change really take a huge step back because there's no federal guidance and or enforcement of what normally would have been, good practices. And so, our friends in California, the state of Washington, Oregon, we've all essentially doubled down on our commitments to, getting to net zero and whatnot. But you see a lot of other states in the southeast regions of the United States that have not done the same. And so you're seeing a fragmentation within the United States around climate change. Now, what that presents for us is an opportunity for those blue states or those states that are doubling down to form a coalition of our own, whether it's a blue wall or whatever you want to call it. But the reality is that between the three states that on the West Coast, we basically have a block that takes up the whole West Coast. And so there's a lot of power in potentially, pooling our carbon credit trading system, for instance, or just sharing best practices. And so I do think that there's opportunity for collaboration on a state or subnational level in that sense. At the same time, there's still a lot of effort around, green corridors, from a port perspective, right? These green corridors are done on a local level between ports. So the Port of Seattle and the Tacoma have a green corridor with the Port of Ulsan in South Korea. Singapore and Shanghai have green corridors with LA and Long Beach ports, right? And so there's a lot of work still being done on a local level that really is unaffected with the exception of some potential funding by the federal policies. So I'll stop there.
Oh, fantastic. I mean, the green corridors. I mean, in Chile, we also are suffering, from the ports are suffering a lot because of the marejadas. I mean, the very strong waves coming from the sea. And to work the green corridors and to look towards the ocean is extremely important. Thank you. In order not to be in the US so much, I will jump into Jan to Quebec, and then we come back to the US just to make a bit of a change.
You're not going to let her pile on?
Okay, Jan, go ahead.
Well, thank you. You probably know that in Canada, in Quebec, we face lots of headwinds right now. Tariffs are very hard on our economy, and this is why more and more we have to work together. I think that what is very good is to see that more and more in America we have interest to put a price on carbon, and this is really, really interesting. I think that the example of our common market on carbon is really something that is show to the world that it can work. Of course, California is always a little bit better than Quebec, but they are so close friends. But it's great to see, for example, that we have organizations that are taking care of all the rules and how we will work together. WCI, for example, who is taking care of Quebec, California, but also Washington, New York, to be sure that we have the same standards together and you can be alone and adapt, but I think that together we transform, and this is really, really what we have to do, working together. WCI, CPA, make sure that communication between us is the key and we face the headwinds all together.
You're absolutely right, and I want to add Chile to the learning process. We've been working a lot with Canada, in fact, and to learn from others, from the experience. You save so much time, so much time. So collaboration helps a lot, not only in the final result, but doing those big jumps, because we need to be fast. And in that respect, collaboration can help a lot. Going back to you, Karen, back to the US. Thank you.
So the imperative to do this is evident. I would also say the current political atmosphere in America may actually spur more collaboration outside of America as a counterbalance. I actually think that's really crucial to our climate right now, which is very much about America first. But I focus on sustainable food production and food security for people. And also, I believe that there's such a thing as sustainable trade that's complementary, and that's a very important part of the economic growth, especially for some of our most impoverished nations. So I feel like first, if I were an advisor, I'd say, I've already seen my friends from Canada making new friends in other places because we haven't been very nice to you lately. I'm just saying that I think it may create a new political dynamic in other ways that will allow all of the states and subnationals and the cities to know that they have partners. I will also say I was very pleased this morning to be on a panel with colleagues from Tennessee on energy and what they're doing on transportation corridors, as well as New Mexico, which is doing amazing things also on energy. That is creating momentum and proving out the business concept that I think is a very key strategy on this. And I know that because of climate changes and the resiliency issues and opportunities for growth, we have more of our businesses that are making investments in South America and Latin America. And so we have to remember the other partners in this. It's government to government, it's business to business, and then the easiest pathway for all of us is academia to academia. We just need I'm saying this at a bad time because they're trying to chop our science, but to have scientists who travel back and forth, who do trials in each other's countries to find out what's working in one place, will it work here, what are the adaptations necessary? These are hugely important partnerships, but it takes all of it together to help move us forward together. And the moral imperative of doing that has never been more crucial. So let's rise to the moment and show some courage. And you all don't gang up on us. Like, we want to come along for the ride, and we'll keep innovating where we are, and we'll share it with you, okay?
But you're absolutely right. I mean, this collaboration is not only private to private or public to private, but also very importantly involving the academia, the science into it. And the challenge creates opportunities. So we have to find those opportunities and don't be overwhelmed by the challenges, but look for the opportunities. Yeah?
I just want to pick up what Karen said, because I think that presents one of the, for climate change and for the climate movement, creates one of the greatest opportunity for us in academia to bridge the science and the data gap that exists at this point in the Americas, where we exist in this one space.
Fantastic. So now I will move to more specific questions to each of you. So I will start with you, Uma. The Caribbean is at the front of effort to enhance resilience and adaptation. How is the accelerator fostering collaboration among small island nations and international partners to boost climate-smart investment and strengthen regional resilience?
So I am here as the chair of the board of the Caribbean Climate Smart Accelerator. And the accelerator was really created to foster innovation, to try to do things differently, but also to crowd in the private sector. So that's our main goal at this time. And so we're 6 years old. We were launched after Hurricane Maria devastated Dominica and British Virgin Islands and that group. And so we thought that at the time, the private sector's role in climate action was not very recognized. Even though they were there, they were building resilience in their own systems, and as they say, they call it, our bottom line was always protected. But there was not a focus on how do we crowd in private sectors? How do we crowd in entrepreneurs? How do we crowd in innovators, small-scale innovators that we could bring things to scale? And so the Caribbean Climate Smart Accelerator, that's what we do. And over the last 3 years, we have launched what we call a Climate Smart Map. And if you go to the website, you can actually play around with the map. And what the map does is to list every single thing. It's populated with all the projects that we have in the region. And it brings about this commonality. So it separates, disaggregates in the commonality, so that investors from outside can say, oh, 4 countries in the region have this commonality, and therefore we can invest across scale. So we build scale, especially in the Caribbean, where the economies are so small, projects are so small, private sector are so small. And therefore this map gives an opportunity for the countries to say, hey, this is where we are, but also for that investor profile to also be listed to say, oh, but this looks good, we can invest in it. And it has gained, so out of that, we have launched an innovation fund, and the small private sector in the region, the small entrepreneurs, the small innovators can say, hey, we have a climate solution. Would you want to help to bring this to scale? And therefore, that's really part of the work that we do now. A lot more, but this is really a big part of the work that we do now.
So what you're doing is like putting together
matchmaking.
the demand
demand
for
and the
it,
supply,
exactly,
yeah,
and
and
looking
the
for the
possible
supply
supply.
and trying to make the match,
The
but making
matchmaking,
it attractive because
Yeah.
it has a larger scale
and to
that
build
will
scale. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's super important in
Yeah.
order to be able to accelerate, as you were saying. Sam, what about the ports serve as essential hubs in the regional and global economy? How is the Port of Seattle encouraging decarbonization through collaboration across the supply chains and with ports in other American cities and countries on the continent?
Yeah, I appreciate that question. Before I answer that, I want to build off something Karen said because she made a comment about how the lack of federal engagement might lead to a counterbalancing, right? I want to build on that. I said it actually, in some ways, has actually led to an acceleration. And the lack of federal engagement has, again, talking about those of us who have doubled down, accelerated our work. And I'll tell you a really real example, and this ties into the question as well. The Port of Seattle is currently working on a green corridor with the Port of Busan, South Korea. Now, we had a problem. When the Trump administration took over, the talks around the green corridor all but came to a halt. And the reason was because, just for a little background, in America, ports are governed on a local level, right? So there is no federal body that oversees ports. At the Port of Seattle, we are our own special purpose government. The city of Long Beach, the city of LA, they manage the ports of Long Beach and LA. Other countries like Korea, it's managed on a federal level by the central government, right? And so when we originally announced the at COP27, the Green Corridor, it was actually the US government and the Korean government that announced it, but it was the local entities that were executing it, right? And so this whole time up until this year, until this administration, the coordination on the Green Corridor was so slow because the local port in Korea would have to report to their central government, and then they would have to go to the State Department, which would they relay it to the local port, right? Super bureaucratic. So when the Trump administration came into power, the Korean government would try and get it across to us, but it wasn't coming down. So there was a complete disconnect. And so just before COP, actually, 2 weeks ago, we signed a memorandum of understanding between Seattle, the Port of Busan, the Port of Ulsan, and the Port of Tacoma, because they say, let's stop with this nonsense. Let's just do port-to-port relations, directly coordinate on the Green Corridor between the ports. Let's just cut out the central governments altogether, right? And so they're not completely cut out per se. However, we've created a direct line of communication. And so that's how we're working and navigating the current situation in the United States. As far as the general role of ports, you got to remember, ports are a hub that can aggregate demand, to your point earlier, right? Think about container vessels, cruise vessels, trucks. You have the terminal operators and the cranes, right? The grain terminals. There is no single entity within the logistics space that touches all segments of the supply chain like a port does, whether it's warehousing, trucking, etc., right? And so when we talk about aggregating demand, we're a natural convener of the consumers or the eventual end users of that sustainable fuel. And so when it comes to, again, accelerating that, we convene all the players and say, hey, what fuel in the maritime industry are we converging on here? Hey, crews, if you guys go towards LNG and the container vessels go towards methanol, the port can't bunker both. So we need to stay coordinated on this. The only entity that can bring these industries together is a port entity, and that's where the value of ports is in this sustainable fuel transition. And so I think that's what we naturally do as ports, is say, hey, truckers, terminal operators, carriers, crews, warehousers, let's all sit at the table, let's converge on a plan so that when it comes to getting that price parity on fuels, we're all in on methanol. We're going to scale on methanol, bring the price down so we can all get to that net zero. So I think that's our kind of 10,000-foot level strategy and our approach.
Amazing. So first you are making the corridor shorter, which is super important. Yes, you are. So amazing, yes. and also realizing the power of the ports. No, I mean that you are putting many industries, different industries together and thinking together and trying to solve the problem together. That's extremely important. So thank you for that. Back to Jean, I would like to ask you, you were mentioning that Quebec has long supported cross-border cooperation. So including with the US states and through regional carbon market partnership that you were explaining before, what lessons can be learned from Quebec's experience in building lasting multi-jurisdictional climate alliances? What can we learn from you?
Thank you for the questions. I took some notes because I didn't want to forget. First of all, very important, open and honest communication. This is the key. It's essential. And if you want to have success in collaboration, this is the first thing that you have to consider. Second, perseverance. Perseverance? Yeah. Because it's not always easy. So you have to, keep working, keep doing things. It could come from legal, political, technical. It's very, very important to keep determination on what you want to do. Third, never underestimate the power of human relationship. This is the key. Mechanisms, tools, and policies are very important, but trust is really, really something that you build between people, and this will be the key. And sometimes, virtual meetings are very important, but just go outside together and have a beer.
Or a glass of wine.
Or glass of wine. I'm sure that my team wrote that for me here, but anyway. But investing in these personal connection is very, very important. Fourth, leverage each partner's strength while working together to address weaknesses. This is also very, very important. And again, it means that you have built confidence with your partner. Also, anticipate potential pitfalls, because it will happen. Obstacle will happen, and finally, stay connected globally. Just look at what is happening in Europe with their market, for example. Keep evolving your own system with your partners, and this is again will be the key. I just want to come back to what you said. Last week I was in Rio for the local global summit. United States were there in big numbers with governors and everything, and it was so inspiring, because when you're not living in United States, you don't know what is happening really inside the country. So that was, Karen, so important for us to see that, something is happening, something that is in our values. And I came back from there with lots of hope, lots of energy also, because also it's not working right now at the UN at the at the parties level. So some nationals and cities and local has more and more space, and we have to take that opportunities to really bring the decision near the public that we represent. So thank you for that.
Fantastic. Yes, persistent is super important and necessary, and human contact. That's what we are all here in this COP. Yeah, I mean, to meet at least once a year to talk to each other, get to know what is happening at the territory in your neighborhood is something that is more difficult to do it through a screen. And in person with a beer, a glass of wine, yeah, whatever, at this moment, it's really makes a difference. Yeah, I mean, and then you can keep working through the year. But you need that push of energy, as you're saying, that personal contact to make the relationship and then keep on working. Yeah? So Karen, I will move to you. Well, California has established strong environmental and trade connections with Latin America. Yeah. How can substantial collaboration, particularly in sustainable agriculture, climate-smart food systems, and methane reductions, enhance regional climate efforts?
I wish I had the answer to that. No. I think that what we need to do is bring even more focus to this as a region. I also think when we choose a country for taking a climate smart ag delegation to, it's because we have very specific things that they're doing we want to learn from, and we want to share where we are in our journey. And so trying to create everybody's system for sustainable agriculture, we have to remember that it is very place-based and keep that in mind. And so for me, the more specific I can be, like we did a climate smart ag delegation to Peru last year to see all of the uptake that they're doing in specialty crops, to understand their water issues, to know that some of our families want to be able to grow, and this would be a good place for full season support. That was important for us, but we had very specific things we were trying to do. We weren't trying to solve the whole equation of sustainable, resilient food systems, but we're all part of it, and it's important that we think about, if we want them to be resilient, they need to be more local and part of place, so that they're also culturally appropriate. They're supporting local economies with all those smart businesses that support them. We came to Brazil earlier this year, just to the Sao Paulo region, to better understand their deployment of biological solutions for pest management. We're desperate for those kinds of solutions. We've heard a lot about what Brazil has done in streamlining the registration process, and even more what they're doing on the adoption of that by their farmers themselves. My guess is that's probably mostly the large farmers, which brings me to the areas that we can all collaborate on, is identifying the gaps that we're trying to fill within our own local system. Because we could sit at a lot of tables together, and I'm always willing to do that over food and wine and a beer once in a while, or a martini, but whatever. But the more specific we can be on where we've got people at the university that are working on that, we can start to match up things so that we're taking those steps to get to the bigger picture, but we're not losing sight of the critical importance of doing that. So I'm not trying to be a reductionist here. I'm just trying to make it very connected to the very people, the communities, and the most underserved that need this more than ever. And that technical assistance is a huge part of that. So if we've learned from our system of cooperative extension and working with community-based organizations that are trusted messengers, can we share that? Can we help build out that system? And I think that's what I try to focus on, is all the things I can do. Because if I sat in my office in Sacramento and said I want the whole world to have sustainable agriculture and everybody to have the nourishing food they deserve, I wouldn't be able to do it from California. It's really, this is one thing that is very dependent on local communities with the infrastructure that helps make it possible, and the trade relations and the human relations and the cultural relations that make it why we do the work that we do. I'm not sure that that's a satisfactory answer.
Fantastic. And the fact that this is a two-way relationship. Yes, I mean, that's super important. It's not California teaching the South. Yeah, it's
humility.
Absolutely, humility is teaching, but also receiving and learning, and there is a lot of learning process that can go both ways. From Chile, we have taken advantage hugely on that relationship, wildfires, methane, different elements that we've been learning from each other and trying to, again, reduce the risk, reduce the cost, try to do the jump from one point to another without passing through the learning curve, completely. So thanks a lot. I will move now to some open questions, so feel free to jump into the conversation. So the first is about building collaborative frameworks, okay? What can we do here? So what kind of institutional structures or platforms do you think are necessary to support long-term climate collaboration across the Americas, beyond political cycles or shifts in national priorities? Who would like to jump in?
I want to, Karen, I'm looking at you, Karen, as if I'm in love with you, right? because I co-facilitate the agriculture discussion here in the COP. And so all you're saying is what we discuss in the room. But outside of that, I think that here in the Americas, we have some really great institutions. For agriculture, we have ICA. I worked at ICA for 15 years, and so I know the OS is there. We have some really great institutions. This panel itself is part of the challenge we have, the language barrier across the Americas, which prevents integration and engender the fragmentation. And I think if we want to, without affecting the political economy, we have to solve the language barrier a little bit more. We have to do better in solving the language barrier that we have. Take Jamaica, for example. Every single time we lift up out of Jamaica, we go to Miami or we go to Panama. And both Miami as a country in itself only speaks Spanish. Panama is Spanish and we're English. And so half of the time, we're here in Brazil, which is part of the Americas, and we're here in Belém. 90% of Belém does not speak English, Spanish, or anything else. And so for us, that's one of the challenges that I think if we have to overcome, if we want to deepen collaboration in climate change, in trade, in agriculture. The other part of it is I think we have to believe in ourselves that we are a region and we are the Americas, and I think sometimes we forget who we are, and therefore strengthening the institutions that were created to do exactly that. And Embrapa here in Brazil, the work that you did in Chile. Chile, I think, was one of the first countries in the Americas that had an agriculture policy that became the framework for development in the Americas. We need to learn, and we need to have these learning journeys that you spoke about, Karen, to just learn from each other and stop reinventing some of the wheels. Let's stop there.
Amazing. Absolutely true.
I made a few points yesterday on a panel about this, but there needs to be some frameworks in there that really, in the world, that standardizes the metrics, the benchmarks, and the data. I think, to the extent that, we have states across America that are tracking, greenhouse gas emissions, etc. I think there's still a lack of standardization in the data and how, in what form we receive the data, how it's being organized, and what it's being benchmarked against. And the standardization is really important because, you don't want sustainability to come at the expense of competitiveness. And when you think about the sheer amount of capital that goes into some of our efforts on sustainability, those costs get passed down to the end consumer or end customer, right? And so what I would hate is for Washington State to lose business to California because we're doing something that raises the cost of doing business, or vice versa. I would hate for states to be competing with each other on the West Coast because we're pursuing the same goal of net zero, but we're doing it in different ways that it's impeding our ability to also provide the economic benefits that ports and the agriculture industry provide, right? And so that standardization is key. And in the Northwest, we have something called the Northwest Clean Air Strategy. It is a pact between the Port of Tacoma, Seattle, and Vancouver with the same goals of having emission by 2030 and to get to net zero by 2040. And what that does is, because we've all made the same commitment to the same reduction goals, it doesn't matter if you send a container to Vancouver, Tacoma, or Seattle, the variation in the cost of doing business with those ports is not because of our climate change investments. It's due to other things, right? So it doesn't become this race between the ports when it or a competition between the ports. We're not losing container volume to Vancouver because they're doing less climate change work, right? I'll tell you where we are losing volume to. I am losing volume to Georgia and Houston, right? These other states in the United States that are not as aggressive when it comes to fighting climate change, where they're not making the investments on sustainability, so their cost of doing business for carriers is much less. So they're saying, well, I got to pay $500 more to go to that green port in Seattle. I'd rather take it to Houston, right? So that lack of standardization, the lack of a framework is what's getting in the way of, I think, maintaining competitiveness while tackling the sustainability aspect. So in that light, we are very supportive of the IMO's Global Net Zero Framework, which is essentially a standardization across the globe on greenhouse gas emissions. There's a levy on greenhouse gas emissions that can then be used to help developing countries, underdeveloped countries with the resources to get to that net zero target. But we need a global, if not a national framework, so that everyone is working on by the same rules, and that there's a level playing field. That's all we ask for. All we ask for is a level playing field, and that's where the frameworks are going to be crucial.
A standardization that lowers transaction cost in the end. No,
Absolutely.
I mean, we need to do that, definitely. Karen, you wanted to say something, or you're okay? You're okay. You leave.
Well, I'm
Jen?
going to bring you to another space. I was very privileged to spend 25 years on the sea. You know, I was an explorer. I was, I overwintered in Antarctica. I did Northwest Passage when it was full of ice. And I spent most of my time trying to be close to the people. And very often I have the feeling that we are in our echo chamber and we talk to ourselves. If we want to win that battle, we will have also to connect more and more with the public, with people. That's why I like agriculture a lot, because it's, it's there. But I think this is our biggest challenge. We can feel a kind of fatigue right now in the public about climate change. We feel also lots of headwinds coming from the federal government in US, of course. So I think that we have to relate more on nature and bring the public with us. Then when you want to explain why it's $500 cheaper in Houston, for example, education will help to bring the values that public will understand. And this is probably, I think, our biggest challenge, bring the solution of climate change and adaptation to the ground level where people are really touched by what we can bring, So communication is the key, education, of course.
Thank you, John. Super important to connect. Don't forget that. And let's talk now about the opportunities. We've been talking about this leadership opportunity. So how can the Americas, as a region, establish itself as a global leader in integrating economic growth, social inclusion, and climate goals? How do we do it?
I think we are already. I think we just have to recognize that. But I think if we harmonize in the first place, which is what we were talking about, and if we, as you say, connect more, climate change touches life, climate impact touches lives. And unless we recognize that what we are talking about and why we are here and why we are doing work, it's for the lives and the survival of the people, then we will be here talking again and again and again. And so, as the Americas and working in the institution in the Americas, collective action, we have to recognize that we should stop competing. We should collaborate more and stop competing against each other. And that's the only way we can then lead the world the way we want to lead it.
I want to follow up on that, because I honestly believe, in my observation, that next generation, youth will make the difference. I see them so purpose-driven when they can find their why earlier in life than I ever could. I find them scared to death about climate change. I find them, we did our first ever circular bioeconomy summit a few weeks ago in a local region that's their economic development strategy. 3 of the pitches they had by young entrepreneurs were young people who made a discovery in a lab on campus and were already entrepreneurial. 3 of the 6 were from Brazil. And so, like, making sure we haven't closed doors for opportunities for youth to be able to do what I wish I had done at their age or could even know was possible. I think that's also part of, I'm still thinking about the challenge of, like, holy cow, I'm one of those people. I took several languages. I never had practical uses for them, and I'm part of the problem. It's like, how do we engage in that more? And this is where we're going to miss things like USAID. What are the alternatives to that? And I will say, on a panel I was on yesterday, they're looking to California to send all kinds of ag tech to them. And that, how do we get, I mean, that is very capitalistic driven to get a return on money at a higher rate and a fast rate. How do we engage the people with some of the solutions, but not all of the solutions, to see this whole region as one, because markets will attract them. Yeah. And so we've got to figure this out. You've got the right idea.
Anyone else? It's okay? Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you very much for your remarks. I think it's important to show the way to the new entrepreneurs. I mean, these new entrepreneurs need to have the options and the proximity. In Chile, for instance, we've been working with speed dating in between big companies and small companies, startups, because sometimes the big companies have big problems, but they don't have the flexibility, the innovation, while the startups do have all that, power, energy, solution. And it was very interesting because in some cases, the startups did have the solutions that the big enterprises were looking for, but other times they didn't. Not because they were wrong, but because they didn't understand the need. So the proximity helped them to understand the need, go home, prepare the solution, and come back. So I think to provoke that relationship, in between big businesses and small businesses can fill that gap, can really shrink that gap. Because you have problems, you have possible solution, but if they don't meet, the solution won't happen. Yeah.
If I can add on that, then, if we are able to connect with people, if we are able to connect with nature more and more, I think that there's also one resources that we should bring with us. It's the indigenous knowledge. We didn't talk about it, but I think this is vital. I'm going to give you just one example. When I overwinter in Antarctica, we started with our way of doing things, by drilling some piece of wood together to go on the ice. Forget it, it will never work. The Inuit knew how to use lines and cord and all that, and we used that, and it was perfect, It's a small example, but I think that the relation with nature that we have to bring back in our life, we should involve more and more in the indigenous communities and knowledge.
Absolutely true. I mean, Chile just presented our NDCs, and for the first time we are included indigenous points of view into and commitments and work together, in Chile. And I think that's a step forward, which is very important, definitely.
Let me add that I also think that we have to start talking about some of the failures. And I don't call them failures, but because the challenges that some of us had, that the young people could realize that they can take up, and therefore failure convenience. We're starting what we call now failure convenience. So people can just come and talk it out and like, oh, but I had that same challenge. How did you overcome? And so we're starting this movement of actually calling it failure convenience. If you think you have failed at something with the entrepreneurs, come and we'll talk about it. Maybe somebody will come up with a solution so that we can, because we don't like to talk about that, and so that's an important part of it as well.
Definitely. I mean, we keep on talking about the success and not about the failures, and we can learn so much about the failures and the process. So I couldn't agree more. Fantastic. Thank you very much for the discussion so far, and I would like to ask you now for a final reflection. So what is one specific step or partnership that could improve climate cooperation in the Americas over the next 2 years? So very short term, that's a challenge. One in 2 years, one step. What could you do? What would you promote?
So I step back into the heart of the CSA and to say we probably could have a learning journey among the countries, from the entrepreneurs, right across the Americas. How do we finance that is another challenge. But
Money.
But I think that could help for people to see that you alone don't have this challenge. It's a challenge that all of us face and all of us can solve together.
Amazing. Thank you. Sam.
Yeah, kind of in the same light as that, one of the things that I've started to do again at the Port of Seattle is rekindle some of our sister port relationships. So we have sister port relationships with Rotterdam, with Kobe, Japan, South Korea, etc. And that's been so important because, historically these sister port or sister city relationships have really been about exchanging culture and education. But now I feel like in the 21st century, sister port or sister city relationships need to be centered around economic development and sustainability, right? And so my focus has been on, okay, what ports are there out there that have the same principles and goals as we do? What can we learn from them and what can we teach them in turn, right? So when we talk about the Americas, I was at the UNCAD Global Supply Chain Forum in Barbados, and they have a huge cruise industry down there, right? And we are the biggest cruise port on the West Coast. And given our sustainability goals, how can we then share our knowledge with those ports down in the Caribbean, in that area, and vice versa? What can we learn from them, from their cruise industry that we can take back? So that subnational relationship, you can call it sister ports, sister cities, whatever you want to call them, but in the same light as the delegation or trade missions, there needs to be some of that local level connection that gets rekindled so that we can start learning from each other on a local level.
So amazing. We can put Chile in the list.
Let's do it.
Remember Chile.
I got it.
Write it down.
We would like that.
I gotcha.
So I'm going to be very specific about ag, and I'm sure this will make you happy. I want to go home and double down on getting more of my states, especially in the western region, but not exclusively, to think about ILCA as a way of bringing Americas together on the agricultural side, and think about an agenda that is really about very specific, starting easier with very specific problems that we all know that we share, not trying to eat the whole apple. That's for my vegetarian friends.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to have two elements, but they are linked together. First of all, price on carbon. Why? Because if you want to do something, you need to have money. The reason why California and Quebec are so involved, it's because we have money from the carbon market. More than $70 billion in California, more than $10 billion in Quebec, and we are really small. So where do we invest that in the next 2 years? In agriculture. Because this is where we can make a difference in climate change and biodiversity loss in short term. And she will like me a lot with that. So, yeah.
No, I think carbon pricing, carbon market is definitely a must. We have to put a price on the externality, but remember that our goal is not to raise money through the taxes. Hopefully nobody's paying because we are not polluting. Though we are raising money because there is pollution involved, but then we need to be clear that there are some differences. I'm super glad to hear that you're able to invest that money raised through the budget, and then they're allocated, okay? And that's a problem for us.
Of course.
So the carbon market, for instance, the Article 6.2 or the offset system that we have, where we can really build the project, then we ensure that the money stays in the territory and in the project. So I would add that to that point.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah? Because we need that action to happen, okay, and not the money, you know, I mean, obviously it goes somewhere, but the somewhere not necessarily will help us with the climate action.
I just wanted to give a specific example of how that has worked for us in agriculture for Climate Smart Ag. Just through my department, over $690 million has been invested in healthy soils, dairy digesters, and other strategies of manure management for methane reduction. And for water use efficiency, there's a couple others in other agencies, so it's actually over $1 billion for sustainable food production that targets on saving energy, saving water, improving soil productivity, and that 1/3 of the world's biodiversity that's below the soil. And so if we think about multi-benefits that come from ag, also is the beginning of a very robust trade opportunity for you, but it's keeping dollars locally if we think about local resilient food systems, which doesn't have to come at the expense of global, but it's critical that we have local resilient food systems to nourish people where they are. So it has a huge economic development.
Absolutely.
There, I did my lobbying. Are you proud of me?
And just to add, in Quebec, by law, you have to reinvest that money in climate change, and this is how also we were able to help others, because we made sure that in the law, part of that money has to be reinvested in other countries, developing countries. So, for example, we gave, since the Paris Agreement, more than $100 million to different projects around the world, because we think that, you know, we have to be part of the global solution as well. So in agriculture, for example, we work with the FAO, just on the other side, and we have a very, very good example of adaptation in Senegal, in Haiti, and so this is the kind of money that has to be used for the right reason.
Fantastic. Hopefully we can all move in that direction, because definitely then we can put the money where it's needed. Well, I want to thank you all for participating in this seminar. And remember, collaboration for climate action in the Americas is not only possible, but vital. It's super important. We have shown different examples of different sort of collaboration. We have also realized that we need more collaboration, and that needs to keep going. We put the challenge of the 2 years, so not only look that far away, but look in the shortened time. And I would like to thank you to the US Climate Pavilion, okay, to hold us this very interesting and hopeful conversation here, to the Climate Registry for this organization, and thank you all of you for your very important and constructive participation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.